Thank you for allowing us to join you today for your conference in Korea. Those of us who are joining from other places around the world and limit our ability to be with you in person. But I'd like to take a moment to introduce those who are presenting on behalf of the EdSAFE AI Alliance today. My name is Dale Allen. I am the president and co-founder of the Dextera Institute and also the co-founder of the EdSAFE AI Alliance. I have about 30 years of experience being involved in building open source technology solutions to transform the delivery of education. And from this collective work have led to the development of EdSAFE AI Alliance as another needed, important effort in the marketplace. I'd like to ask my colleague, Jim Larimore, and then Beth Havinga to introduce themselves.
Hello, everyone. My name is Jim Larimore. I'm the Chief Officer for Equity and Learning at RID. I have been with the company for about 18 months now and joined after a long career working in post-secondary education, primarily in the United States. Also spent some time working at the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, at ACT, a national testing and research organization. And the through line in my career has really been a focus on student success and addressing equity issues and learning. In joining RID, I came on board in part to help enable or enact the mission that our founder laid out for us to use AI to remove inequality, inefficiency, and inconsistency in learning. And as an extension of that, in discussions with Dale and other colleagues, realized that there were some big challenges shaping up in the world of AI in education that needed to be addressed. And so joined him as one of the co-founders for the EdSAFE AI Alliance. And Beth, why don't I turn to you?
Thanks. I'm Beth Havinga, and I am the Managing Director of the EdSAFE AI Alliance. And I've been so excited to come and join this initiative. I come with a background of working with non-for-profit organizations, bringing together governments and the private sector to try and work together on innovative solutions for the education ecosystem. And I also bring with me a strong background in standards development, specifically within interoperability, the things that really lead to supporting the important work that we have ahead of us with the EdSAFE AI Alliance.
Okay, so I'll get the discussion started by providing a little bit of background. This section will focus on kind of what is AI and why is this an important moment in time for us to think about issues around the use of AI in education. So Beth, if you'll roll forward to the next slide. One of the things that we all have in common around the world is that the last 2 years with the global COVID pandemic has really pushed for much more rapid adoption of the use of technology in education. Much of that technology is being or has AI or artificial intelligence incorporated into it. And one of the things that we know is that throughout human history, technological advances move faster than the adjustments that we need to make in understanding human values and how that applies to technology or the use of technology. We feel that this is a particularly important time where our values have to come to the table or be brought to the table sooner so that we can really think about how our intentions around the use of education technology can better serve the interests of humanity. When we think about artificial intelligence or ask the question of what is AI, one of the ways that you can look at this is that AI is a branch coming out of computer science or the study of computer science that allows us to build smarter machines or computer programs that can perform tasks that typically require human intelligence. AI is sometimes also described as a mathematical function that allows computational devices or systems to ingest large amounts of data, and then from that data to detect patterns or make inferences that can then be used to trigger decisions about access to information, what recommended content might be served up to you next, and so on. There are three kind of core disciplines of AI that I think many people are becoming more and more familiar with. Computer vision, which gives us things like facial recognition. I'll jump to the right side of the slide, natural language processing, which you might encounter through an app on your phone or a voice detection equipment on your phone or a home device that can process the language that you speak and turn that into information that the computational device can translate. For computer vision, you might think about, is a machine able to see? For natural language processing, is it able to hear? And then how does that machine then turn that into other forms of information that the computer can process? So in the middle, machine learning is basically coming up with quantitative approaches to processing large quantities of information and either following then a set of pre-scripted decision rules, or in the case of neural network machine learning, having a system that is able to make its own inferences and effectively learn. So where the machine is actually involved in learning and making sense out of the world that it encounters through the data that flows into the system. This I just wanted to share as a sense of how the field is developing and the kind of work that is going on in trying to explain to people what AI is, so that we can involve educators more directly in conversations with software engineers and AI research people. I love this because this was literally a scrap of paper that someone from MIT, the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, used to respond in real time to somebody, asking a basic set of questions and mapping out a flow chart so that you could, the person that was in the discussion could understand when they were already encountering AI in their lives. And so this is hopefully large enough on your screens or in the PDF files that are shared with you, so that you can follow along with this, or perhaps annotate it and make some suggestions to us about how we can help explain to the world what AI is, and then ask ourselves the questions about how we can use AI most effectively to advance the good or social good kind of interest that we have in learning. So with that, I think, Dale, I am turning next to you.
Thank you, Jim. And I want to pick up on kind of the global challenges and opportunities that we're facing with the use of AI in education. But before I go into too much more detail, I want to give some context with the work we do at Dextera and what led us to this collective effort. So at Dextera, we build, as I noted before, we're an international non-governmental organization. So we're an NGO that is dedicated to building open technology solutions. We do this with active members or engaged parties, institutions of higher education, K through 12 school systems, ministries of education, companies, philanthropy, and others, to build or to solve some common problems. So whether that's about integration points between enterprise systems and applications, or data management solutions to enable you to control and optimize the use of all of your data, or creating next generation systems or platforms where you can plug and play any application to develop solutions to help your business run better, your education delivery, to optimize student success and meet the needs of that. Everything we have done around the world has been through collective community. So a community of practice focused on a problem and bringing our technology core out to those solutions, but with real use applications. I give that information as context to say, in the last 2 years, we have been focused on, with our members around the world, about how could we spur the development of better tools, AI and machine learning enabled tools, as Jim just described, to better meet the education needs that are out there, so that equity and equitable success for students in education is something that can be supported by AI-enabled tools with a human-centered approach. So teacher in the middle with AI providing a solution. And one of the means with which we've done that is to think about creating what we call open authentic data. And open authentic data is using our infrastructure to then create anonymized or simulated data that could then be used to train tools better, to remove bias, and to make them more equitable in their use and application by folks across the world, around the world. In that work, we partnered with RID to run our first challenge, an open challenge using their existing open data in the EdNet, for the EdNet challenge, and had great success, where we triggered over 4,000 teams in participating, developing a new AI solution to solve a very specific problem with access to millions of pieces of data. And from there, we started to understand the global challenge that we all faced. If we spur the market to build greater tools, whether for use in the post-secondary or K through 12 world, what standards or benchmarks are out there to build them to. And so I'd like to pick up on that with the challenges and opportunities, Beth, if you would, to kind of continue down off of that context. So when we think about AI in education, what we're starting to see more and more of are all sorts of tools that start to think about things in different ways and use, again, their algorithms to allow us to have smart content that is delivered right to a student based on educational plans or other aspects, preference that may be in existence. We have things like personalized learning, where how can that platform or that tool provide us recommendations back to the students for their resources, for their assignments, whatever it is based on their demonstrated need. And in terms of they're working on a problem and they continue to miss some aspect of the learning or the learning content, and they're not able to master that piece, and to have them move through to the next level, how can we use those personalized learning components? Then the universal access tools that we're starting to see, whether it be automation in terms of translation or other supports for different learning types, are starting to become more prevalent around the world. And again, virtual facilitation, especially as we've seen in the COVID world, having other methods to include facilitators, augmentation, intelligent tutors, and understanding what they are, how they're developed, and how they can make a difference is something that we think they're all really important aspects of the new AI to come in education, but how they're being applied and utilized is critically important for us to think about as both a challenge and an opportunity. Beth? Right now in the United States, our challenge is, again, this is data from the United States of America. It's probably similar in many regards in countries around the world who have access to technology in a similar way. Not all countries have equitable access to that, but in the United States, we have a challenge of, in an average public school, we have over 1,600 education technology products and applications in use. And that is astounding and challenging for both optimal utilization, efficient utilization, and effective utilization. And we think it really sets the context and challenge within this challenge of there's way too many tools in play for teachers to be successful in the delivery of education, and there might be ways to address that, better ways to address that. Beth? And as I noted before, as we started to realize, if we spur the market, there really is no effort, or has been no efforts, to establish benchmarks to help the consumers, the teachers, the parents, the students, and even the administrators at the school level to discern what is a quality and reliable AI tool. And that is something that needs to be addressed through collective action. And we are taking the lead with that with EdSAFE AI to try to take that opportunity forward and collectively invite you and everyone else around the world to help us do this together. As we've thought about this, our community of practice model at Dextera, and then by extension with the EdSAFE AI Alliance, really is about bringing together the entire ecosystem. And as I just noted, an open invitation to all of you at this conference and to your networks to join into EdSAFE, because what we have already been pulling together and need to do more of around the world is we need the folks that are the thought leaders, the policymakers, the ministries, those who can help establish benchmarks and put them into play in the marketplace, but we also need the companies, the firms, the philanthropic organizations, and the market leaders who can assist us, and the companies, the AI and education companies, to not only adopt, but participate in the development of this. And most importantly, we need the consumers, those parents, those teachers, those administrators, and the rest in the industry to be active participants. And if we do this in a thoughtful and facilitated, shared manner with transparency, and engagement across all of these, our goal is to start to have a community of practice that develops shared benchmarks for the tools that can emerge in AI and have equitable impacts and use around the world through a continuous process of improvement. Those major pain points, we think an ecosystem like that can start to address. So there has been, prior to EdSAFE AI Alliance, there's been significant initiatives around the world with no real unified leadership or outlook. There's not been the best communication between the relevant parties. So the government bodies and those who are developing products, those who are leading the need and development of new tools, haven't necessarily been on the same level. In particular, those in the governmental policy arena. We've been actively engaged recently with the EU Commission. Here in the United States, we're actively involved with the US Department of Education. We'll be engaged with others around the world to start to collectively think about best practices and thoughts on policy that can be done. But currently, there is none of that occurring. And there's no way for us to understand what is a good and best practice in one location or region of the world or another. And we have lots of groups working on the same challenges, but not in a coordinated fashion. And so the good example that we utilize a lot and see a lot is there is a significant amount of work going on currently on ethics in AI and how are ethics applied in AI in education. And there is excellent thinking and work being done in individual firms, companies, governments, standards organizations for their specific area of need, but no one is thinking about it in a collective way. And lastly, there's really no decision-making process because there's no specification or standard to point to. It's hard for someone at the local level to buy a product and know what they're getting. Because there's nothing to point to say that this tool, this product, this AI tool developed for a purpose meets the needs that I have and is built to a certain standard or specification. So I therefore know it's effective or safe. And that's something we're seeking to address collectively. And where we've started with our scope is that EdSAFE AI Alliance is really focused on establishing benchmarks and standards that seek to encompass these 4 categories. And the acronym spells it out for us. The safety, the S. How do we ensure that a product has the appropriate security and privacy requirements that will protect the appropriate student data, level data, and PII that is necessary there, as well as any other regulations within that region or country. Every one of our countries have different requirements for privacy, whether you're in the European Union, where you have GDPR, and here in the United States, where we have varying different levels of requirements. We need to be able to determine that and have a tool that we can say not only meets those, but it also does no harm with that data, and more importantly, could do good in the world. Secondly, we have accountability, or the A for accountability. How do we define those stakeholder responsibilities and make sure that we have policies that will enable a marketplace to be innovative and not restricted with policies that are established without input from the collective ecosystem, but rather from a place of establishing policies based on the information you have in your limited circle. And so we need to define those stakeholder responsibilities and help to inform policy with best practices around the world. And on F, or fairness, that we need to ensure that a tool is going to support the goals of equity delivered in an ethical manner, and that the data that it's trained on and its algorithms that it's utilized are not going to produce bias and replicate those biases that may be available, or may be imported into the algorithms by limited amounts of data, and also by those who develop them. And the last is efficacy, or E for efficacy, is how can we ensure that these tools will improve the learning outcomes? And is there a way for those tools to go through some review with a standard or to a benchmark established by researchers that we can point to and say that has efficacy as a tool and will improve learning outcomes according to these established benchmarks. And so all of those things are what make up, through the collective action of those who have joined in, the emergence of the EdSAFE AI Alliance. With that, I'd like to turn to Beth to pick up in our next segment.
And it's an exciting alliance. I think something that is obviously so necessary, as both Dale and Jim have mentioned, with some of the activities going on in the market. There is so much happening, and the key is bringing it all together so that we can make the best use of each of these initiatives. So as we started to come together to try and see what we could do as an alliance, how we could help the AI in education industry, the policymakers, the teachers, and also the students and their families, we decided that the best thing we could do was to try and bring together all of those existing networks, all of the frameworks that are out there, the education organizations, the research that's currently going on in all the different categories that we just mentioned, as well as the work that's happening with standards and standards bodies. This work is in its beginning stages, and it's something where there's a lot of knowledge out there, but we need to make it accessible and understandable. The other thing we thought was so key to what this alliance could do was to not only connect everybody, but be able to provide a way with which they could communicate with each other and make their knowledge, make all their work that they've already been doing visible and accessible on a global level. And that also means providing global leadership in terms of some of those thought leadership components, the education components, and then always with the idea in the back of our minds of developing this really safe, trusted, equitable environment so that students, teachers, educators, policymakers all know that they can trust what is being used within the education system and make use of some of the amazing innovations that we can see that could really help the education industry. So as an alliance, what we aim to do is to create that network and bring together all those amazing initiatives. And as Dale and Jim have both mentioned, we can't wait to have all of you join in and be part of this and participate. Some of the first things that we are starting out to do is to create common ways that we can communicate with each other in. So things like common definitions, creating vocabularies that we can understand and translate, and also comparing and creating frameworks and models so that when we start discussing these topics with each other, but also with our respective governments, with our respective schools and our environments, we can understand what's being discussed. We can refer back to some of the definitions so that it makes those topics accessible, because some of these topics are really complex. And so anything we can do to support making that complexity accessible is something we're really interested in doing. We're also leading a number of different education initiatives to promote this understanding. So there are things ranging from developing some papers, different kinds of content that we can share through multiple platforms, as well as offering discussion rounds, different ways within which we can have these different conversations together on a global level. So it's taking place in different environments. And part of that is then providing that thought leadership. So participating in any of the events around the world where we think we can bring some of that leadership to the fore, where we can also then help further the conversations that are happening. Because I think as all of us have experienced at different conferences around the world, we can get inspired when we're there, but sometimes that's where the work ends and we get to the next conference and have to wait to get inspired the next time. And one thing we'd love to do is continue those conversations outside of those individual inspiration events and be able to take all of that activity and build on it. Obviously, we are very strongly focused on trying to develop, firstly, some benchmarks according to those categories that Dale unpacked for us earlier, so that we can really hold the industry, but also our policy and decision makers to specific benchmarks and understand what we're working towards. And from these, we are very clear in hoping to standardize some of the areas within AI and education. So being able to provide standards frameworks that can then be implemented in all of our different geographies, all of our different regions, understanding that there will be adaptations and that there are very unique situations for learning and teaching around the world. But being able to have these common frameworks means we can all understand what's going on. We can call back and refer to these, and they can lead some of the work that's happening to mean we can further the really good work that's happening in standards bodies without having to recreate the wheel. We also would like to develop some certification frameworks that would allow environments in, again, each of the respective countries to be able to really certify what they're doing, prove that what they're doing is safe and what they're doing adheres to some of the common goals that we're going to outline. And more than anything, especially initially, it's increasing the visibility of what AI means to education, the possibilities that are out there, also the risks, so that we have a better understanding as we go into these really, really important decision-making sort of work groups that are taking place at the moment. We are currently focusing on a number of different things. We started mentioning some of them just before, and that's around providing thought leadership. So participating in events, presenting, being parts of some of the really important discussions, but also creating a lot of those documents that we feel is necessary to help the decision-making processes currently, and providing really dedicated support to any institution or government body that's currently grappling with some of these regulations, some of the way to create really strong and fair policy that still enables innovation. We're also then working with the different standards bodies and considering different ways that we can get the entire industry to come together and really innovate around the idea of standards as well. That's also then continuing to develop along the open data environment so that we have really impressive data sets to work with so that we can better understand how each of these products is made and built. As Dale mentioned as well, really important to focus on things like biases that are just inherent in some developments so that we can make all of the products fairer, so that we're not excluding certain groups of learners, certain environments, because key to all of us is the equitable nature of education so that we can provide access to all learners and provide really innovative environments for all educators. And part of that then also goes into participating in a number of the key standards bodies events. We will also be conducting our own events and our own discussion groups, and we can't wait to invite you to all of those, as well as to help participate in some of the research work that we are doing. We've initially identified not only our SAFE categories that we'll be working within, but also the topics of research, governance, so looking more towards that policy work, and then outreach and advocacy. And aligned with all of those, we will be starting to develop our working groups, and we would love participation. I think we can only grow and learn from each other and all of our combined experiences, and that will inform the work that we continue to do. We are so lucky to have already found over 180 like-minded organizations around the world, so within 18 and growing countries. And these are groups that are very strongly focused on completely different areas of education, from higher education through to primary schools, high schools, from tiny education startups through to really big organizations, other consortiums. And I think it shows the need for this kind of organization, the fact that so many are so interested in participating, and also the willingness of our education industry and our education environment to really come together, acknowledge the importance of what this of what AI means within education, and really work on a solution. We've been very active since officially founding the EdSAFE AI Alliance, and we've been participating in a number of different events around the world to try and grow that network. We are constantly growing our own community, and I think that's going to be the key, to have as many different environments and situations represented as we can, to really ensure that we are getting that really good representation from a global level. And we've also been invited to submit to multiple different funding opportunities throughout the world. So looking at some of the opportunities available to us within Europe, within the United States, also within Australasia, and sharing all of the opportunities we're finding around the world. So it's exciting. We're growing fast. We can't wait to keep growing and to keep representing all of the work that's happening out there, to connect all of that really impressive body of work of research, all the initiatives that are happening so that we can grow together and create a really safe network for AI in education and develop those standards and frameworks that we believe are so important as we continue. So I think from all of us as well, I'm sure Dale and Jim will chime in here. Thank you so much for letting us participate, and I'll hand over to Dale and Jim.
Thank you, Beth. And again, thank you for the opportunity to present to all of you today at this conference. We are focused in a very concerted way around the world to establish these benchmarks. We want to invite you to join us with that common goal that these tools, the potential and opportunities available with AI to support equitable education is immense and significant. And all of us have a burden in that to deliver these in a way that is safe. But the best thing we can do is collectively work to build trust in these tools. And so that the consumers, the students, the parents, the administrators will actually have the trust to use these products. And we do that through that common knowledge, understanding benchmarks and standards that we're working to do. So I will end my comments and turn to Jim one last time, but with just an open invitation, join us through the website, edsafeai.org. Join in with UNESCO and other partners around the world and help us do this together. And with that, thank you to Beth and Jim, and I'll turn it to Jim.
Great, thanks, Dale, and thanks, Beth, as well. I think for me, one of the most exciting elements of this is that we have very rapidly pulled together a large network of people and organizations that are dedicated to working together to try to make to drive improvements and change in the field. It is not lost on me that that RID was started about 7 or 8 years ago in South Korea. That the company that was started there in Seoul has had the opportunity now to become a driving force behind this international collective effort. And that today we get to speak to you in Seoul and in Korea for Education Week. So we're happy to have traveled around the world and back again and look forward to what comes next.